reformed the church according to Roman lines. So he frowned very much on the kinds of worship that I've just been talking about, the focus on the pattern day, the Turas. We're talking about Turas mBan. The Turas was a really important part of religious worship. And to some extent, we still have the Turas, but it's not the same as it used to be in the 18th and 19th centuries. So what the mission of the church was after 1795, when Madrid was established and the penal laws were relaxed or repealed, was to reassert clerical control over the Irish church. And that was a project that continued throughout the 19th century. The great historian Emmett Larkin wrote a book called The Devotional Revolution, or an article, and in it he showed that at the beginning of the 19th century there was about 25% mass attendance, but by the end of the century there was 75% mass attendance. So you can see how in a very short space of time the focus changed and began to move away from St. Dermot as well into the local chapel, where of course the priest had a lot more say in how things were done. So ritual became priest-led and the leadership of the laity diminished. So rosary and benediction, novenas, First Fridays, all of those are Roman customs that were brought in, and they effectively, in most cases, replaced the sorts of texts and performances that this piece of paper here represents only very poorly. Shasa Waheni, again, I mention him because I have quite an interest in him, or Joe Heaney. He was saying he made these songs popular again to some extent, especially Queen and the Dream With You, and he was saying that there was an opposition to accepting them because they weren't standard liturgy, they weren't approved by the committees and so on and so forth. So eventually he did manage to get them back into circulation again, but not without some struggle. So the great Paul Cullen, yeah, and his program, very successful. In doing research for this talk, I came across a number of texts of Creedence. So now we have 12 texts from Gardameal. So this is a world premiere here. It's fortunately I didn't have to search and search and search. All I did was put Queen and the Dream With You into the search engine of turas.ie. This is a site where the material collected in the 1930s by school children all over Ireland was sent to Dublin, and it lay there for a long time, but then it was digitized and is now available to people to look at, and it has been very, very popular. There's been a kind of a volunteer program where people will transcribe the texts and upload them so that eventually the whole of the body of folklore that's there will have been transcribed and then will be available more easily. I transcribed this text as my sort of payback for finding it so easily. So we have, again, she's from Blacksod, the woman, Mrs. Joyce, Danny Hyoge, as a gartur, Shawl Fulahad, Achlin, Foldo, Condamwio. A hiish, Keres Gordlean in 1937, where she qualified a hook she on the mohe, led in a hoige. Rugu is Togui, Erumada Kartur. So she was born in Kartur and she was living in Achlin. Just really interesting. And her version is very, very close to Mrs. Riley's. There are differences too, though. I won't go into them today, but it's just really interesting for me to see this text, and that we have an extra version and a very full version that conforms exactly to what Angela Burke says, the longest versions come from Mayo. So, I've never heard the air, a particular air from County Mayo for this song. So I'm wondering if the audience today knows of Mayo version for this air. Everyone knows the Shoswahini version. So that's the Shoswahini version. It's a very melodic, beautiful tune, and again resembles the keening with the oh hon, the alas, alas, syllables repeated and repeated and repeated. But that's not the only way to sing that song, and it would be an enrichment to us if we could find Mayo tunes for these songs. It would be something. I happened to, Seamus Ennis was a famous piper and folklorist. He went to Donegal in the 40s and he recorded a version from a Donegal woman from my own area, and this is how she had it, and we can see in this version that it's much closer to the keening tradition. So, if I can remember it now. Kochigira within a goodisha malanu hinu. No, that's not it. No, that's Sarah New Williams' version of it, which we were talking about last night. So Sarah New Williams was another singer from Carlin, County Galway. She sang Queen of Zimwyd as well, but she had a different tune for it. And to me, this tune is much more reminiscent of Uni than Shoswahini's version, because it starts on a high note and comes right down. It's almost like the keening tunes seem to resemble blues music. Mm-hmm. They start high and they come down. So. Ken fablas in the grande pasje, oh, de so, nenach nanin to the wakawatin, oh, de so. So you can see how that music starts on a high note and it's just repeat. There's no melodic really variation in it. It's one line, endlessly repeated. And the Donegal version is quite like that as well. Yeah. And I can't think of it now because there's too many airs in my head. So I wonder if we can come to a point where we can discover what. Is there anybody who remembers or knows about a recording, or, it would be very interesting to find what the Mayo versions were, because that would really help us renew that local tradition. To move to the secular tradition, one of the great collections of Irish folk songs was published in 1940 by Micheál O'Gallagher. I don't know if you can read that, but that's what it says anyway. Micheál O'Gallagher, Oranno Iris. And that was the subject of the CD published in 2014 by local people here, including the mBan family. So, interestingly enough, it's tied up with the tradition of immigration, the heavy tradition of immigration, which is really one of the reasons why the language changed here and a lot of this culture was lost. Seamus of the Larga travelled to the US in 1940, and he stayed with the Gallagher family in the city of Chicago, and he described it as going back in time, where all the hurly-burly of the urban American scene was going on outside. It was like going back to the 19th century in Eris, to this family, sibling household of brothers and sisters who only spoke Irish within the house, and who maintained these songs, kept them going, and wrote them down and sent them to him. One of the sisters, Bríd Ní Gallagher, she sang, the night before he left, she sang the song Now You War. I attempted that song last night, and not very successfully, but we got through it anyway. So here's the Now You War down here, the bridge, and it's beautiful when you're driving in here from out at the bridge there. The river follows you all the way in and accompanies you. It's a beautiful feature, and obviously it was very emotional to the Gallagher, because she sang this the night before the Largy left, and obviously when he was there they had a new focus and lots of chances to be practicing their songs. So he was the idea is quite sad that these people are living away because there's nowhere, no living for them here, and it wasn't from choice they left, but because they had to. The song itself is a really interesting song. It's a song of praise for the Áin Mhór, of course, for this beautiful feature in the landscape, but it's also a lament for Seamus McCusker was the poet. It's believed to have been composed around 1810, and there's, in the poem itself, in the words, we think that he might have been in trouble because of something, some girl that he got into trouble or whatever, and that he ended up in Tralee in Kerry a long time before the Rose Festival was making a name for it. So he was a bit fed up at this stage, and he was looking for lodging. He was a travelling man selling baskets or something, and he arrived on the street, and there were 13 houses on the street, and he was refused lodging in every one of the houses. But he was passing along anyway, and he saw this creel sitting, sort of upturned creel, and he kind of sat down, and very, very, very fed up. And he said, he started to make the song. And as he was making the song, he could see the people in the houses coming out and sort of wondering what was going on and getting more and more interested. And he kept making verses anyway. And when he'd finished, all the people came out and said, "You'll have to stay with us." So they kept him for, every house kept him. He stayed there for 13 nights, a night in every house. That's the story anyway. So he was a poet, and he got the luasaigh that the poet deserved as well. He got hospitality in return for his poetry, and a very old idea that continues in that story. Although he wasn't a paid professional poet, he nevertheless got the reward. So this is some of the words of it. It's interesting that the Mayo versions favour different verses to the Galway versions. It's very well known in Connemara, this song. But the Mayo verses are a little bit different. The verse of farewell is common to both. So, Cés lang teall góir sé ma léongan me nachtig de híú san na iafhain sa spór tis ótra anóí is ógamáil tír na hí le gwainir mór an is cóladar ganil na sea. 100 farewells to you, Owen Moore. I'm sorry that I'm not sitting beside you tonight. I'd find sport there in the evening and late at night with a glass on the table and warm, convivial company sitting around, such as we had last night, courtesy of Justin Salmon. Thank you very much, Justin. Oh, not Mishita, sorry. Oh, am I not defeated? I wouldn't be ashamed to meet my heart were broken, far from my people and with nowhere to rest. And I hope to the King of Grace that I won't be straying for much longer, but what's the use in hoping for that, because I'm stuck anyway. My shoulders are injured and my legs are weak. My ankles are cut from always travelling the roads late at night. So that's, I mean, there are several more verses, but that's the one that Mrs. Ginnerly sang. We're going to listen to Mrs. Ginnerly now, because she has a particular version of the air that is very, from my point of view, very musical. She was 70 when she recorded this in 1931. She was brought specially down to NUI Galway, which was then called College Nalscaladalia. And in a room in the quad there, this German man, Wilhelm Dögen, he recorded her and some other singers from Eris. A special car crowded them down. I can imagine the day they had going to Galway and recording, and then afterwards. She was 70 at the time. She couldn't read or write. She could speak both Irish and English. She was from Rostock, near Mulranny. And this, we don't have a speaker, but I'm going to put the speaker down towards the speaker of the computer, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it. It's online anyway at durgan.ie. I'll show you the site in a minute. So it's just a little snippet, about a minute long, but musically it's really interesting because she has these very wide intervals in the song, and it's a very differently sung to the tunes that people use nowadays. It's very interesting. A singer from Galway called Thalog Ní Cheannamáin has recently issued an album called Rilla, and she used this woman's air instead of the normal air, and it's almost like a reinvention, complete reinvention of the song. And that's the kind of vision I have for these archive recordings, the sound here is weak and it's full of sausage and rashers, the crackle, but there's a huge potential for recreating, for renewing by accessing this material. Another forgotten voice, maybe if I can find it now to finish off, would be from 1957. Ciaran McMahon visited Portachoy, just north of us here, in Carrowhige, and he recorded some singing from young women singers there. And I just would like to, the text of this is on the back of your handout. There's a great flirting session going on here. So the text, this text, you can actually get this. There's a series called Siúla Scéalach by Ian Lee, who's the archivist in RTE Radio, and he has made podcasts of his programs. So this is available online for anyone who wants to listen to the whole thing. I'll just go through the text. It's again connects us to the other world, because this woman is not really a flesh and blood woman. She is in some ways, but she seems to be a shapeshifter as well in this song. She's a banshee. So we have this other world connection all the time. The Galgan Wiogam, as I went to Mayo, chatting to this woman, she put her hand into my pocket and she didn't leave me with a penny. But the King of Sunday knows that I'm not sad about it if I were to get trust on the roads, but of course I won't. I slept last night in Castlebar beside the bright love of my heart. When I passed my hand over so that I would kiss her mouth, I found nothing on the bed but the pillow and myself. I am a long time travelling, looking for a housewife, but I haven't found a report of her for more than 2 months, until I saw the beautiful woman sitting on the fairy hill, her hair in 3 tresses being swept by the wind. Mr. Burke are you happy with Maida as a woman, as a wife? Or, Mr. Burke, are you happy with the love of your heart? I have neither house nor dwelling to bring her to, and since she wasn't in store for me, I bid her farewell. There was a line here I couldn't figure out, so I'm asking Seamus to help me with that later. I'll travel this country until I find my darling, down by Kilvidija and from there to Dunmore, and where the cuckoo sings all around the groves. There are people who covet the riches of cattle and horses, more who covet great amounts of money, but they should spend some of it with sport and enjoyment than have a huge heap of it gathered the day they go under the sod. So that's advice for you now, folks, and I think I'm going to stop there.